I'm not suggesting this is easy. If it were easy, everybody would be doing it. But it is simple. And there's a profound difference between something being simple and something being easy. The formula is simple. The discipline is what's hard. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed how negative thinking comes naturally? You don't have to sign up for lessons, do you? Nobody has to teach a child how to throw a tantrum or how to be jealous. Negative thinking is part of our default programming. It's the path of least resistance. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Positive thinking, on the other hand, is a discipline. It's something you have to work at, cultivate, and practice daily. It's like tending a garden. The weeds, those are your negative thoughts. They'll grow all by themselves. But if you want roses, you've got to plant them, water them, protect them, and care for them. You see, I learned a long time ago that success leaves clues. If you want to achieve something significant, find someone who has already done it, and then study what they did. And when you look at truly successful people, I mean the ones who have found not just financial prosperity, but true fulfillment, you'll notice they all share one common trait. They've mastered their thinking. They've learned to kill negative thoughts before those thoughts kill their dreams. Now, why is this so important? Because everything you'll ever have in your life flows from the quality of your thinking. Your relationships, your health, your finances, your happiness, it all begins with what goes on in your mind. Let me share something profound with you. You are not what you think you are, but what you think you are. Let that sink in for a moment. Your life right now at this very moment is a direct reflection of your thinking up to this point. If you don't like your life, you've got to change your thinking. It's that simple. I remember talking to a man once who told me, Jim, I've been broke for so long, I can't imagine being anything else. And I said to him, well, there's your problem right there. What you can't imagine, you can't become. Your imagination, powered by either positive or negative thinking, creates the boundaries of your life. Most people live their entire lives within the confines of their negative thinking. They've built these invisible prison walls around themselves, brick by brick, negative thought by negative thought. And the sad thing is, they don't even realize they hold the key to their own freedom. Now, I'm not here to give you some fluffy, feel-good message about positive thinking. I'm talking about something much more fundamental. I'm talking about purposeful, disciplined control of your mental environment. Because make no mistake about it, your mind is territory that is constantly being fought over. And if you don't take deliberate control of that territory, something else will. Let me tell you about two wolves. There's an old parable that says inside each of us, there are two wolves fighting. One wolf represents negativity, fear, doubt, limitations, and failure. The other represents positivity, courage, confidence, possibilities, and success. Which wolf wins this battle? The one you feed. Every time you entertain a negative thought, you're feeding the wolf of limitation. Every time you choose a positive thought instead, you're feeding the wolf of possibilities. And over time, the wolf you feed becomes stronger while the other becomes weaker. It's as simple and as profound as that. But here's what most people don't understand. You don't have to accept every thought that comes into your mind. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean you have to invite it in for dinner. Give it your favorite chair and let it put its feet up on your mental furniture. You have the power and, yes, the responsibility to examine your thoughts and decide which ones you'll entertain and which ones you'll evict. This is a fundamental principle that can change everything for you if you apply it with discipline. You know, it amazes me how careful people are about what they eat. They read labels, they count calories, they worry about GMOs and pesticides and artificial ingredients. And that's good. You should be mindful about what you put into your body. But what about what you put into your mind? Are you just as careful about that? Because I promise you, the thoughts you consume are just as important, maybe even more important than the food you eat. Let me ask you, would you eat garbage from a dumpster? Of course not. But when you consume negative news all day, when you participate in gossip, when you expose yourself to toxic people and toxic conversations, that's exactly what you're doing. You're eating mental and emotional garbage, and then you wonder why you feel terrible. Killing negative thinking starts with being incredibly selective about what you allow into your mind in the first place. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Jim, I can't help it. Negative thoughts just come to me. And you're right, they do. You can't always control the first thought that pops into your mind. But here's the important part. You absolutely can control the second thought, and the third, and the fourth. You can decide whether that first negative thought becomes a pattern of negative thinking, or whether you replace it with something better. That's where your power lies, not in preventing the first thought, but in how you respond to it. I want to share a powerful technique with you. When a negative thought appears, immediately ask yourself, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Is it moving me toward what I want or away from it? Just that simple question can stop negative thinking in its tracks, because it forces you to evaluate the thought rather than automatically accepting it. The quality of your life is directly connected to the quality of your questions. Poor questions create a poor life. Better questions create a better life. When you ask, why does this always happen to me? Your mind will find reasons why you're a victim. But when you ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Your mind will find wisdom and opportunity. The questions you ask yourself throughout the day are incredibly powerful. They're like a steering wheel for your mind. So be deliberate about the questions you ask. Use them to direct your thinking toward what you want, not what you fear. You know, one of the most damaging forms of negative thinking is what I call the comparison trap. We look at someone else's success, their highlights reel, and we compare it to our behind-the-scenes footage. And we think, I'll never be that good, that successful, that happy. This kind of thinking is absolutely toxic to your progress. The only person you should compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you becoming better today than you were before? That's the only comparison that matters. Everything else is just a distraction that feeds negative thinking. Another form of negative thinking that can absolutely destroy your potential is what psychologists call catastrophizing. This is where you take a small problem and mentally turn it into a disaster. You lose a client and suddenly in your mind, you're going bankrupt. You make a mistake and you convince yourself your reputation is ruined forever. This kind of thinking creates emotional mountains out of circumstantial molehills. And the problem is your body and your nervous system can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. So you experience all the stress and anxiety of a worst-case scenario even though it's not actually happening. That's a terrible way to live, and it's completely unnecessary. Instead, when you face a setback, train yourself to say, this is temporary. This is specific to this situation. This is not a reflection of my entire life or my worth as a person. Just that simple reframing can completely change how you experience challenges. Let me tell you something else about negative thinking. It's not just unpleasant, it's expensive. It costs you opportunities, relationships, health, and yes, money. I've seen people talk themselves out of millions of dollars because they couldn't overcome the negative voice in their head that said, this won't work, or you're not good enough, or the timing isn't right. Negative thinking is the most expensive habit you can have. It costs far more than smoking or gambling or any other destructive habit you can name. Because while those other habits might damage certain aspects of your life, negative thinking damages everything. Now, I want to be clear about something. Killing negative thinking doesn't mean it got reality. It doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist or putting on a fake smile when things are genuinely difficult. That's not what I'm advocating at all. What I am talking about is facing reality with the right perspective, seeing things as they are, but not worse than they are. And then focusing your mental and emotional energy not on the problem itself, but on finding a solution. Not on what's wrong, but on what you're going to do about it. You see, the most successful people aren't those who have the fewest problems. They're the ones who have developed the greatest ability to solve problems. And that starts with how they think about their problems. When faced with a challenge, unsuccessful people immediately go to thoughts like, why is this happening? This is terrible. This always happens to me. I can't handle this. Successful people, on the other hand, think, what's the opportunity here? What can I learn from this? How can I turn this around? What's my next move? Same situation, completely different thinking, and as a result, completely different outcomes. I found that one of the most powerful ways to kill negative thinking is through what I call deliberate gratitude. Not just feeling thankful when good things happen, but intentionally looking for things to be grateful for, especially when times are tough. You can't be grateful and negative at the same time. Those two emotional states can't coexist. So when you feel that spiral of negative thinking beginning, stop and ask yourself, what are 3 things I can be genuinely grateful for right now? Do this consistently, and you'll find it becomes harder and harder for negative thinking to take hold. Another powerful strategy is to change your language. The words you use, both when talking to others and in your internal dialogue, have a profound impact on your thinking. When you say, I have to do something, it creates a sense of burden and resistance. But when you say, I get to do the same thing, it creates a sense of opportunity and privilege. I have to go to work versus I get to go to work. Feel the difference. One feeds negative thinking, the other counters it. One makes you feel trapped, the other reminds you that you have choices and opportunities that many people would love to have. Your words shape your thinking, which shapes your emotions, which shapes your actions, which shapes your results. So be incredibly careful about the words you choose. They're either working for you or against you. Let me tell you about a concept that changed my life many years ago. It's called the slight edge, and it's based on the idea that success and failure aren't the result of big dramatic moments. They're the result of small, seemingly insignificant choices made consistently over time. Reading 10 pages of a good book every day might not seem like much, but over a year, that's 3,650 pages, or about 18 books. Doing that for 5 years means you've read 90 books that someone who didn't establish that habit hasn't read. Think about the knowledge advantage that gives you. Similarly, one negative thought might not seem significant, but one negative thought, reinforced daily, becomes a negative belief. A negative belief becomes a negative perspective. A negative perspective becomes a negative life. That's the slight edge working against you. On the other hand, one positive thought, reinforced daily, becomes a positive belief. A positive belief becomes a positive perspective. A positive perspective becomes a positive life. Same principle, dramatically different outcome. The key is understanding that where you are in 5 years will be the result of the small mental choices you make today, tomorrow, and the day after that. Success is never owned, it's rented. And the rent is due every day in the form of positive, purposeful thinking. You know, when I talk about killing negative thinking, some people misunderstand. They think I'm saying you should never have a negative thought. That's not realistic. Negative thoughts will come. The question is, what will you do when they arrive? Think of negative thoughts like unwelcome visitors knocking at your door. You can't prevent them from knocking, but you don't have to invite them in. You don't have to offer them refreshments and ask them to stay a while. You can acknowledge they're there and then firmly send them on their way. One of the most effective ways to do this is through a technique I call thought interruption. When you notice a negative thought trying to take root, you deliberately interrupt it with a predetermined positive thought or affirmation. You essentially train yourself to say, no, I'm not going down that mental road. I'm choosing this one instead. It might be something as simple as saying to yourself, this thought isn't serving me, or I choose to focus on what I can control. Whatever works for you, the key is to have these interruption phrases ready before you need them so that when negative thinking begins, you have an immediate response. Over time, this becomes more and more automatic. What once required conscious effort becomes a mental habit. And that's when real transformation happens, when positive thinking becomes as natural to you as negative thinking once was. Let me tell you about an exercise that can dramatically accelerate this process. It's called the evening review, and it's something I've done for decades. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to reflect on your thinking throughout the day. Where did negative thinking creep in? How did you respond to it? What triggered it? What impact did it have on your day? This isn't about beating yourself up when you find you've engaged in negative thinking. It's about bringing awareness to your mental patterns so you can change them. What you're aware of, you can control. What you're unaware of controls you. By doing this evening review consistently, you'll start to notice patterns. Maybe you engage in negative thinking most often when you're tired or hungry or after interacting with certain people. This awareness allows you to be proactive rather than reactive. You can strengthen your mental defenses when you know you're going to be in situations that typically trigger negative thinking. Now I want to talk about something that might surprise you. Sometimes what looks like negative thinking is actually a form of necessary mental processing. Let me explain. When you experience a disappointment or a failure, and we all do, it's natural and healthy to feel bad about it for a while. To acknowledge the reality of the situation. To learn from what happened. That's not negative thinking, that's wisdom. Negative thinking is when you stay in that place of disappointment indefinitely. When you make it your mental home rather than a temporary stopping point on your journey. I like to use what I call the 24-hour rule. When something genuinely disappointing happens, give yourself 24 hours to feel bad about it, to process it, to learn from it, and then move on. Make a firm decision that after that time period you're going to shift your focus from the problem to the solution, from the past to the future. This gives you the emotional space to process what happened without letting it become a pattern of ongoing negative thinking. It acknowledges that you're human while also holding you accountable for the quality of your ongoing mental environment. Let's talk about another aspect of killing negative thinking that many people overlook, your physical well-being. Your mind and body are connected in powerful ways. When your physical energy is low, your mental resilience is also low, which makes you far more susceptible to negative thinking. This is why regular exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, and stress management aren't just good for your body, they're essential for your mind. They create the physiological conditions under which positive thinking can flourish. I've noticed in my own life that on days when I've exercised and eaten well, I find it much easier to maintain positive, productive thinking patterns. On days when I've neglected these basics, negative thoughts find a much more receptive environment. This isn't coincidence, it's biochemistry. So part of your strategy for killing negative thinking has to include taking care of the physical vehicle that houses your mind. This isn't optional, it's fundamental. Another powerful strategy is what I call intentional environment design. Simply put, you deliberately design your physical and social environments to support positive thinking and make negative thinking more difficult. This means being selective about the people you spend time with. Jim Rohn, that's me, famously said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This isn't just about income or success, it's about thinking patterns. If you're surrounded by negative thinkers, people who constantly complain and see the worst in every situation, that will influence your thinking. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. We are all affected by our social environment. On the other hand, when you surround yourself with positive, solution-oriented people, their thinking patterns positively influence yours. Their mental strength reinforces your own. This same principle applies to your information environment, what you read, watch, and listen to. The news you consume, the social media you engage with, the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, all of these are either feeding positive thinking or reinforcing negative thinking. Be ruthlessly selective about what information you allow into your mind. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. Quality in, quality out. It really is that simple. Let me tell you a personal story. Years ago, I made a decision to start each day by reading something positive and inspirational for at least 30 minutes before engaging with the news or checking email or messages. This one habit has probably done more to kill negative thinking in my life than almost anything else. By feeding my mind with positive, empowering ideas first thing in the morning, I set the tone for my entire day. I prime my mind to look for opportunities rather than problems, solutions rather than obstacles. And while I still stay informed about what's happening in the world, I don't let the often negative lens of news media become the primary influence on my thinking. I encourage you to establish a similar morning routine. Feed your mind with the right nutritious ideas before you expose it to the mental equivalent of junk food. Your morning routine is like setting the GPS for your day. If you start with negative input, don't be surprised when you arrive at negative destinations. Now, let's talk about a deeper level of killing negative thinking, addressing the core beliefs that generate negative thoughts in the first place. Because while interrupting negative thoughts and replacing them with positive ones is valuable, it's even more powerful to transform the underlying beliefs that produce negative thinking. For example, if you have a core belief that success is difficult and unlikely, you're going to generate a steady stream of negative thoughts whenever you pursue an ambitious goal. You can try to counter each of these thoughts individually, but they'll keep coming because the source, that core belief, remains unchanged. However, if you can transform that core belief to something like success as the natural result of consistent, intelligent effort, you'll find that positive, empowering thoughts begin to flow automatically. You're addressing the source rather than just the symptoms. How do you change these core beliefs? Through a process of deliberate examination and reconstruction. Start by identifying the negative core beliefs that are generating your negative thinking. These often include beliefs about your own abilities and worth, about what's possible for you, about how the world works, and about what you deserve in life. Once you've identified a limiting belief, examine the evidence. Is this belief really true, or is it just something you've accepted without question? What evidence contradicts this belief? What examples can you find, either in your own life or in the lives of others, that prove this belief is not universally true? Then consciously create a new, empowering belief to replace the limiting one. This isn't about positive thinking in the sense of wishful thinking. It's about adopting a belief that is both positive and grounded in evidence and possibility. For example, instead of "I'm not good at public speaking," you might adopt the belief public speaking is a skill that I can develop with practice and preparation. Instead of "I always mess up new opportunities," you might adopt every experience, whether it goes as planned or not, contains valuable lessons that make me more capable. Once you've formulated this new belief, you need to reinforce it daily. Write it down. Read it aloud. Look for evidence that supports it. Act as if it's already true for you. Over time, this new belief will replace the old one, and the negative thinking that stemmed from the old belief will naturally diminish. This process of belief reconstruction is harder work than simply countering negative thoughts as they arise. But it's also far more transformative because it addresses the root cause rather than just the symptoms. Let me share something else that has been incredibly powerful in my own journey to kill negative thinking. It's the practice of serving others. When you focus on adding value to other people's lives, when you look for ways to serve and contribute, it becomes much harder to maintain negative thinking patterns. There's something about shifting your focus from your own problems and limitations to how you can help others that fundamentally changes your mental perspective. Selfishness and negative thinking tend to go hand in hand. Service and positive thinking are similarly linked. This doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It can be as simple as looking for small ways each day to make someone else's life better, to encourage someone who's struggling, to share knowledge that might help someone overcome an obstacle, to listen with genuine interest and empathy to someone who needs to be heard. These acts of service not only benefit the recipient, they transform the giver. They make it much harder to maintain a negative, self-focused mentality because they constantly redirect your attention outward in a positive way. I've found that on days when I feel negative thinking trying to take hold, one of the most effective responses is to immediately look for a way to serve someone else. It's almost impossible to stay trapped in negative thinking when you're actively focused on adding value to someone else's life. Now, as we near the end of our time together, I want to address something important. Killing negative thinking doesn't mean you'll never have another negative thought. That's not the goal, and it's not realistic. The goal is to develop such strong mental muscles, such powerful positive habits, that negative thinking no longer dominates your mental landscape. Think of it like physical fitness. A physically fit person isn't someone who never experiences fatigue. They're someone who has developed their strength and endurance to the point where they can handle physical challenges that would overwhelm someone who hasn't developed those capacities. Similarly, mental fitness isn't about never experiencing a negative thought. It's about developing your mental strength and resilience to the point where negative thoughts no longer control you or define your perspective. Where you can acknowledge them when they appear, but then consciously choose a different, more empowering way of thinking. And just like physical fitness, mental fitness requires consistent practice. You don't build physical strength by exercising once, and you don't build mental strength by practicing positive thinking occasionally. It's the daily disciplines, the consistent small choices that create transformation over time. Let me leave you with this final thought. Killing negative thinking isn't just about feeling better, although that's certainly a wonderful benefit. It's about becoming capable of creating the life you truly desire, because you can only achieve what you can first conceive in your mind. Negative thinking keeps your mental conception small and limited. It tells you that you can't, you shouldn't, you shouldn't work, it's too late, you're not good enough. And as long as you accept those thoughts, you remain confined within the boundaries they create. Positive thinking, on the other hand, expands the field of possibilities. It opens doors that negative thinking insists are closed. It reveals opportunities that negative thinking blinds you to. It connects you with people and resources that negative thinking would drive away. Your thinking determines your experience of life far more than your external circumstances do. Two people can face identical situations and have completely different experiences based solely on how they think about what's happening. So I challenge you today, make a fundamental decision about the kind of thinking you will allow to occupy the precious territory of your mind. Will you continue to allow negative thinking to limit your life? Or will you begin, starting right now, to kill negative thinking and replace it with something better? The choice is yours. And it is a choice, perhaps the most important choice you'll ever make. Because while you can't always control what happens to you, you can always control how you think about what happens. And ultimately, that makes all the difference. Remember, success is not something you pursue, it's something you attract by the person you become. And the person you become is determined, thought, by the quality of your thinking each day. So begin today. Start small if you need to. Interrupt one negative thought. Plant one positive thought in its place. Then do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. These small daily victories over negative thinking will compound over time into a complete transformation of your mental landscape. As a result, your life. You have everything you need to begin this journey. You have the capacity to observe your thoughts. You have the power to choose which thoughts you'll entertain and which you'll dismiss. You have the ability to create new, empowering beliefs and thinking patterns. All that's required now is your decision to use these capacities, to take full responsibility for the quality of your thinking, and to commit to the daily discipline of killing negative thinking before it kills your dreams. Thank you for your time and attention today. May your journey toward mental excellence bring you all the joy, success, and fulfillment you desire.